Imagine finding a city in the middle of the African jungle. Not a village, a city, with stone walls, towers, and streets that once held thousands of people. Then imagine realizing it's over 800 years old and nobody in the modern world knew it existed. In the 1800s, European explorers stumbled upon massive stone structures in southern Africa. They couldn't believe Africans built them, so they made up stories about lost white civilizations. They were wrong. In Ethiopia, archaeologists found churches carved entirely out of solid rock, going down into the earth like inverse skyscrapers. Today, I'm going to show you what's really been found in Africa. Ancient kingdoms that rivaled Rome, technology that was ahead of its time, and evidence that civilization in Africa goes back further than almost anywhere else on Earth. Welcome to Stories Lost Forever. Stone circles. In the mountains of South Africa, about 150 miles west of the port city of Maputo, there's a stone circle. At first glance, it looks like a random pile of rocks. But when you look closer, you realize the stones are arranged in a specific pattern. They're aligned with the cardinal directions: north, south, east, west. And they line up with the solstices and equinoxes. Local people have known about these stones for generations, but nobody paid much attention until 2003, when a pilot named Johann Heine was flying over the area and noticed something strange. From the air, he could see that this wasn't just one stone circle. There were thousands of them, scattered across the landscape, covering over 1,500 square miles. Some connected by stone walls, forming what looked like roads or channels. Heine teamed up with a researcher named Michael Tellinger, and they started investigating. They called the main site Adam's calendar because of how the stones align with astronomical events. Using erosion patterns and settlement deposits, they estimated the stones could be between 75,000 and 200,000 years old. If that's true, this would be the oldest human-made structure on Earth. Older than Stonehenge, older than the pyramids, older than almost anything else we've found. Now, those dates are controversial. Most archaeologists say there's no way to accurately date stone circles that old because the stones themselves can't be carbon dated. You can only date organic material found near them. Critics argue that the circles could be much younger, maybe a few thousand years old, built by Bantu peoples who lived in the region. But here's what's interesting. The level of astronomical knowledge required to align stones with solstices suggests whoever built this understood the movement of the sun and stars. They were tracking time, and they were doing it in southern Africa, possibly tens of thousands of years ago. The site also sits in an area rich in gold deposits. Ancient mining operations have been found throughout the region, some dating back thousands of years. Some researchers believe the stone circles were part of a larger system connected to mining, possibly used for timekeeping or religious purposes by ancient miners. Whether Adam's calendar is 5,000 years old or 75,000 years old, it proves one thing. Advanced construction and astronomical observation were happening in Africa far earlier than most people realize. Child of Tong. In 1924, workers at a limestone quarry in Tong, South Africa, were blasting rock when they found a skull. It was small, about the size of a child's head, but the teeth and bone structure looked human. They sent it to a professor named Raymond Dart at the University of Witwatersrand. Dart examined the skull and realized it was something nobody had seen before. It had a mix of ape-like and human-like features. The brain was small, like an ape, but the teeth were more human. Most importantly, the hole at the base of the skull where the spine connects was positioned like a human's, meaning this creature walked upright. Dark called it Australopithecus africanus, meaning southern ape of Africa. The Tong child, as it became known, was about 3 years old when it died, roughly 2.8 million years ago. This discovery was huge because it suggested that human evolution happened in Africa, not Europe or Asia like most people believed at the time. For years, the scientific community resisted this idea. Many refused to accept that humans originated in Africa. But as more fossils were found across Africa, the evidence became undeniable. Africa is where humans evolved. Homonality. Fast forward to 2013. A team of cavers was exploring the Rising Star cave system near Johannesburg. They squeezed through a passage called Superman's Crawl, only 7.5 inches wide in some places. On the other side, they found a chamber littered with bones. Over 1,500 bone fragments from at least 15 individuals. The bones were sent to Lee Berger, a paleoanthropologist at Witwatersrand University. When his team analyzed them, they realized these weren't modern humans. They weren't Australopithecus either. This was a new species. They named it Homonality. Homonality had a strange mix of features. The hands and feet looked almost human. The hips and shoulders were more primitive. The brain was small, about the size of an orange, much smaller than modern humans. But here's what made the discovery controversial. The bones were only 236,000 to 335,000 years old. That's recent in evolutionary terms. Modern humans, Homo sapiens, were already around by then. This meant that homonality was living in Africa at the same time as early Homo sapiens. Multiple human species coexisting. And the location of the bones raised another question. The chamber where they were found is deep inside the cave, accessible only through extremely narrow passages. There's no evidence of predators dragging the bodies there. No signs of a cave-in that trapped them. Some researchers believe homonality deliberately placed their dead in that chamber. If true, that would mean a species with a brain 1/3 the size of ours was performing burial rituals. That's behavior we thought only modern humans were capable of. Not everyone agrees with this interpretation. Critics say the bones could have washed into the chamber through water flow, or that there's another explanation we haven't thought of. But the discovery of homonality reinforced something important. Human evolution is way more complicated than we thought. Africa wasn't just where humans evolved. It was where multiple human species lived, died, and possibly even buried their dead. Real quick, if you're enjoying these lost stories, do me a favor and hit that like button. It helps other people find these videos. And if you want more stories like this every week, subscribe to Stories Lost Forever. Klerksdorp spheres. In the 1980s, miners working in South Africa near a town called Klerksdorp started finding these strange metallic spheres buried in the rock. The spheres were about the size of a baseball, made of a hard metallic material, and some of them had 3 perfectly parallel grooves running around the equator. Here's the problem. These spheres were found in pyrophyllite, a mineral that forms in rock layers dated to 2.8 billion years ago. That's billion with a B. Humans didn't exist 2.8 billion years ago. Nothing even close to humans existed. Life on Earth back then was mostly single-celled organisms. So were these spheres. The most common explanation is that they're natural formations called concretions. These form when minerals and sediment crystallize around a nucleus, creating spherical shapes. The grooves could be the result of natural fracturing patterns in the rock. But here's why people get excited about them. Some of the spheres are hollow. When you shake them, you can hear something rattling inside. One sphere was sent to a laboratory for analysis, and they had trouble cutting it open because the material was so hard. When they finally cracked it, they found a spongy material inside that disintegrated when exposed to air. Museum displays in South Africa have showcased these spheres, with some labels claiming they're evidence of advanced prehistoric technology. Other researchers dismiss them entirely as natural geological formations that people are misinterpreting. Sky stone. In the 1990s, a geologist was exploring Sierra Leone in West Africa when he found a strange blue-gray rock. It was lightweight, harder than the most known minerals, and when he had it analyzed, the results were confusing. It contained a high percentage of oxygen and trace elements that didn't match any known terrestrial rock. Some people claimed it was a piece of a meteorite or even extraterrestrial technology. Labs that tested it said it was unlike anything in their databases. But without proper peer-reviewed studies, the sky stone remains in the realm of curiosity rather than confirmed discovery. The problem with these objects is that they exist in a gray area. There are real spheres found in South African mines. There is a real stone that was analyzed and found to have unusual properties. But the explanations range from natural geology to wild speculation. Without rigorous scientific study and transparency about where these objects came from and how they were tested, we can't say for sure what they are. What we can say is this: Africa has geological formations that are billions of years old. Strange things get preserved in rock over that much time. Sometimes nature creates things that look artificial. And sometimes people want to believe in mysteries more than they want to understand geology. Bird of Saqqara. In 1898, archaeologists excavating a tomb in Saqqara, Egypt, found a wooden object that looked like a bird. It had a body, wings, and a tail. It was labeled as a bird figurine and put in storage at the Egyptian Museum in Cairo. For decades, nobody paid much attention to it. Then, in 1969, a researcher named Khalil Messaha was looking through the museum's collection and noticed something odd about the Saqqara bird. The wings were shaped like the wings of a modern airplane, flat on the bottom, curved on top. That's an airfoil, the shape that creates lift. The tail was vertical, like a rudder on a plane. Messa has suggested that ancient Egyptians might have understood the principles of flight and possibly built gliders. He even made a replica of the bird, and when tested, it glided. Not well, but it flew. This sparked a wave of theories. Some people claimed the Saqqara bird was proof that ancient Egyptians had aircraft. Others said it was evidence of contact with an advanced civilization that taught them about flight. Most archaeologists rolled their eyes. To them, it was just a bird figurine, possibly a toy or a religious symbol. The Egyptians made thousands of bird carvings. Some of them are bound to look like airplanes by coincidence. Light bulbs of Dendera. In the Temple of Hathor in Dendera, Egypt, there are stone reliefs on the walls that show people holding large, bulb-shaped objects with wavy lines inside. To modern eyes, it looks exactly like someone holding a light bulb with a filament glowing inside. Some people take this literally. They claim ancient Egyptians had electricity and light bulbs. They point to the fact that the interiors of tombs and temples are covered in detailed paintings and carvings, yet there's no evidence of soot from torches. How do they see in the dark to do such detailed work? Light bulbs, obviously. Egyptologists have a simpler explanation. The reliefs at Dendera show a jed pillar, a lotus flower, and a snake, all common symbols in Egyptian religion. The jed represents stability and the god Osiris. The lotus represents creation. The snake represents the sun god Ra emerging from the lotus. It's religious symbolism, not a blueprint for electrical engineering. But the lack of soot in tombs is a real question. Some researchers think Egyptians used polished copper mirrors to reflect sunlight into dark spaces. Others suggest they used oil lamps that burned cleanly. There are even theories about using a system of mirrors to channel light deep into tombs. None of these require electricity. The Saqqara bird and Dendera light bulbs are perfect examples of how we project modern knowledge onto ancient artifacts. We see what we expect to see. A wooden bird with an airfoil shape becomes an airplane. A religious carving becomes a light bulb. It's fun to imagine ancient Egyptians flying planes and using electricity, but the evidence doesn't support it. Eye of Sahara. In the middle of the Sahara Desert in Mauritania, there's a geological formation that looks like a giant bullseye carved into the earth. It's called the Rikhat structure, but most people know it as the Eye of the Sahara. It's 25 miles wide, with concentric circles of raised rock formations that are visible from space. When astronauts first saw it from orbit, they thought it might be an impact crater from a meteorite. But there's no evidence of impact debris. No shocked quartz. No melted rock. So geologists studied it and determined it's a natural formation caused by erosion. The circles are layers of sedimentary rock that have been worn down over millions of years, with harder rock layers forming the ridges. But that hasn't stopped people from speculating. Some claim the Eye of the Sahara is the remains of Atlantis. The Greek philosopher Plato described Atlantis as a circular city with concentric rings of water and land. The Rikhat structure fits that description, at least visually. And it's in Africa, which some interpretations of Plato's text suggest. The problems with this theory are obvious. First, the Rikhat structure is in the middle of a desert, far from any ocean. Atlantis was supposed to be an island that sank into the sea. Second, there's no evidence of buildings, roads, or any kind of human activity at the site. It's just rock. Third, the formation is millions of years old. Humans didn't exist when it formed. Despite all this, the Eye of the Sahara remains a popular topic in alternative archaeology. It's a natural formation, but it's such a striking one that people want it to be more. Lost City of Aten. Now let's talk about a lost city that's actually real. In 2020, archaeologists in Egypt announced they'd found a 3,400-year-old city near Luxor. It's called the Lost Golden City of Aten, built during the reign of Pharaoh Amenhotep III around 1390 BC. The city was buried under sand for over 3,000 years. When the excavation team started digging, they found walls still standing, rooms intact, and everyday objects left behind. Ovens with bread still inside. Pottery, jewelry, tools. It was like the people just walked away and never came back. The city was a major administrative and industrial center. There were workshops where workers made pottery, glass beads, and furniture. There were bakeries, storage areas, and residential quarters. The level of preservation is incredible. You can walk through the streets and see how people lived 3,400 years ago. Why was it abandoned? The team thinks it might be connected to the religious upheaval during the reign of Akhenaten, Amenhotep III's son. Akhenaten moved the capital to a new city and tried to change Egypt's religion from polytheism to worshiping a single god Aten. This pissed off the priests and the people. After Akhenaten died, Egypt returned to its old gods, and cities associated with the Aten cult were abandoned. The Lost Golden City is one of the most important archaeological finds in Egypt in decades. It's giving researchers a detailed look at daily life in ancient Egypt, something we don't usually get from tombs and temples. And unlike the Eye of the Sahara, this lost city is real, documented, and still being excavated. Sahara Desert drying out. The Sahara is the largest hot desert in the world, covering over 3.6 million square miles. It's one of the driest, harshest environments on Earth. But 10,000 years ago, it wasn't a desert at all. Between roughly 10,000 and 5,000 years ago, the Sahara went through what's called the African humid period. The climate was wetter. Monsoons brought rain. Rivers flowed. Lakes formed, some of them massive. The land was covered in grasslands and scattered forests. Animals like elephants, giraffes, hippos, and crocodiles lived there. And so did humans. We know this because of cave paintings found throughout the Sahara. In places like Tassili Niger in Algeria and the Caucasus Mountains in Libya, there are thousands of rock art images. They show people hunting, herding cattle, fishing, and dancing. The paintings depict animals that couldn't survive in the Sahara today. Elephants, rhinos, crocodiles, even boats, which means there were bodies of water large enough to sail on. One of the most famous paintings is from Tassili Niger and shows what looks like a person in a round helmet or mask, leading some people to jokingly call it the ancient astronaut. It's probably just a person wearing a ceremonial mask or headdress, but it's become an icon in alternative archaeology. So what happened? Why did the Sahara dry out? The answer is changes in Earth's orbit. The tilt of Earth's axis and the shape of its orbit around the Sun changed slightly over thousands of years. These changes affect how much sunlight different parts of Earth receive, which affects climate patterns. Around 5,000 years ago, the monsoons that brought rain to North Africa weakened. Less rain meant less vegetation. Less vegetation meant more exposed soil. Wind picked up the soil and turned it into dust. The land became drier, which created more dust, which blocked sunlight, which made the land even drier. It was a feedback loop. Within a few centuries, the Green Sahara became a desert. The people who lived there were forced to leave. They migrated south towards sub-Saharan Africa or north toward the Mediterranean and the Nile Valley. Some researchers think this migration contributed to the rise of ancient Egypt. As the Sahara dried out, people moved to the Nile River, bringing their knowledge of agriculture, animal herding, and toolmaking. This influx of people and ideas might have helped kickstart one of the world's great civilizations. The Sahara's transformation from paradise to desert happened relatively quickly in geological terms. It's a reminder that climate can change dramatically. And when it does, entire civilizations have to adapt or disappear. Africa is where humanity began. It's where we learn to walk upright, use tools, create art, and build civilizations. The discoveries we've talked about today, from ancient stone circles to lost cities, prove that Africa's history is deeper and more complex than most people realize. Some of these discoveries challenge mainstream archaeology. Others confirm what we already suspected. And a few remain mysteries that we're still trying to solve. But they all point to the same truth. Africa isn't just the cradle of humanity. It's the cradle of civilization. Every year, new sites are found. New fossils are uncovered. New evidence emerges that rewrites what we thought we knew. The story of Africa is still being written. And there's so much more waiting to be discovered beneath the sand. This was the story of Africa's hidden history. If you want more stories like this, subscribe to Stories Lost Forever and turn on notifications. Because the past isn't dead, it's buried. waiting for us to find it.